The village came into view, shrouded in a thick mist that clung to the trees like a damp shroud. As I drove down the winding road, the mist swirled around me, casting eerie shadows on the trees. The radio crackled with static, and I fiddled with the dial, trying to find a station that wasn't stuck on some obscure signal from a distant hilltop. But there was nothing, just static and silence. My eyes scanned the road ahead, the beam of my headlights casting an eerie glow on the trees. The road was isolated, the only sound the soft hum of my engine and the creaking of the old car's suspension. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. I spun around, but there was nothing there, just trees and mist. As I drove deeper into the village, the houses began to appear, abandoned, decaying, and boarded up. They loomed over me like specters. The windows were like empty eyes, staring back at me with a haunting intensity. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that I was alone in this place. Completely, utterly alone. I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know why I'd come here. The village seemed to be calling to me, drawing me in with its eerie silence and foreboding presence. But as I sat there, trying to gather my thoughts, I realized that I was running from something. From the past. From memories that I couldn't shake. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I needed to focus. I needed to find out what was going on in this village, and why I felt such an overwhelming sense of unease. As I stepped out of the car, the mist swirled around me, casting eerie shadows on the ground. I stumbled forward, my eyes scanning the abandoned houses. Where was I going? What was I looking for? I didn't know, but I knew that I had to keep moving. The house in front of me seemed to be calling to me. Its door hung crookedly on its hinges, creaking softly in the wind. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached out to push the door open, I felt a shiver run down my spine. What was I getting myself into? As I stepped inside, the door creaked shut behind me, and I was plunged into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, trying to find a light source. But as I looked around, I realized that I wasn't alone. There was something here with me, something that didn't want me to leave. I spun around trying to get my bearings, but as I looked around, I realized that I was trapped. The door was locked, and I was alone in this dark, foreboding place. I tried to call out for help, but my voice was muffled by the thick walls. And then I saw it, a photo lying on a nearby table, a photo of a smiling family. But as I picked it up, I realized that it was more than just a photo. It was a message, a warning. As I held it up, the photo shattering in my hand, I felt a chill run down my spine. What had I unleashed? And what was I getting myself into? The knocking started slowly, a gentle tap on the wall. But as I spun around, trying to locate the source, it grew louder, more insistent. I tried to call out for help, but my voice was frozen in my throat. And then I saw it, a figure standing in the attic window, watching me, waiting for me. As I stumbled up the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest, I realized that I was trapped. Trapped in this village, trapped in this house, trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't awaken. And as I reached the attic, the figure disappeared, leaving me with a question. What was I doing here? And why did I feel such an overwhelming sense of dread? As I looked around the attic, I saw it, an old chest sitting in the center of the room. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. What was inside? And why did I feel such a sense of foreboding? As I opened the chest, I gasped in horror. Inside were pages and pages of disturbing entries, written in a handwriting that sent shivers down my spine. Disappearances, rituals, and a curse that seemed to be spreading, infecting everything in its path. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was part of this curse, part of a twisted web of horror and despair. And as I looked around the attic, I knew that I had to get out. I had to escape. But as I turned to leave, I heard it, a whisper, soft and insistent. My name, being called from the darkness. I spun around trying to locate the source. But as I looked around, I realized that I was trapped trapped in this attic, trapped in this house, trapped in a living nightmare. And as I backed away, trying to escape, I felt the whispers grow louder, louder and more insistent, until I was consumed by the darkness, lost in a world of horror and despair. And as I looked back, I saw it, the figure standing in the doorway, watching me, waiting for me. The ground beneath me cracked open, and I felt myself being pulled down, down into the darkness. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and as I looked up, I saw the figure's face, a face that was no longer human. As I screamed, the world around me distorted, twisted into dark, monstrous shapes. And I knew that I was lost. Lost in a world of horror and despair, forever trapped in the curse of Blackwood Village. But as the darkness closed in around me, I saw a glimmer of hope, a chance to escape, to break the curse, to be free. And as I took a step forward, I felt a surge of determination. I would escape, I would break the curse, and I would be free. As I stepped out of the car, the mist swirling around me seemed to grow thicker, like a damp shroud that clung to my skin. I had to squint to see anything, but ahead of me, the village loomed, its abandoned houses seeming to stretch out like skeletal fingers. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I gazed out at the desolate landscape. My name is Lena, and I'd been driving for hours, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that had been growing inside me since I'd left the city. But as I turned onto this isolated road, the mist had rolled in, and I'd started to feel like I was driving into a nightmare. The radio crackled with static, and I fiddled with the dial, trying to get a clearer signal. But all I got was a faint whisper of music, and then the static would cut back in. I was starting to feel like I was the only person left in the world. And then, without warning, my car's headlights flickered, and I slammed on the brakes. A shadowy figure had crossed the road in front of me, its presence so sudden and unexpected that I felt my heart lurch into my throat. I peered through the windshield, but there was no one there. The figure had vanished into thin air. I sat there for a moment, my heart still racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The figure had been so real, yet so fleeting. I wondered if I'd imagined it, but a glance in the rearview mirror showed that I was still alone on the road. Shaking off the feeling of unease, I put the car in gear and continued on, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. But as I drove deeper into the village, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The abandoned houses seemed to loom over me, their boarded-up windows like empty eyes staring back. I pulled up in front of one of the houses, its door hanging crookedly on its hinges. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should get out. But something drew me closer, a morbid curiosity that made me want to explore this eerie place. As I stepped inside, the silence was oppressive, and I felt like I was walking into a tomb. The air was thick with dust, and cobwebs hung like tapestries from the ceiling. I coughed, covering my mouth with my shirt. My eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light. And then I saw it, a framed photo of a smiling family, their faces frozen in time. But as I gazed at it, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Something was off. The photo seemed wrong. I reached out a trembling hand to touch it, and as I did, it shattered, revealing strange symbols etched into the back. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I realized that this was no ordinary photo. This was something more. I spun around, but there was no one there. The knocking started then, a slow, ominous sound that seemed to come from all around me. I tried to locate the source, but it was impossible. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, and I felt like I was being herded towards something. And then I saw it, a dark figure standing in the attic window, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving me shaken and confused. I knew then that I had to get out of there. I had to leave this place and its secrets behind. But as I turned to run, I felt a gust of cold wind hit me in the face, and I knew that I was trapped. The diary was in the chest, its pages filled with disturbing entries, written in a handwriting that seemed to crawl across the page. I read the words, my heart racing, and as I realized that this was no ordinary village. This was a place of dark rituals and forbidden knowledge. And then, the whispers started. My name, softly called from the darkness. I spun around, but there was no one there. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and I knew that I was in grave danger. I tried to run, but the walls seemed to be bleeding, slow, terrifying streaks of darkness that seemed to reach out and grab me. I stumbled backward, my breath quickening, yet as I realized that I was trapped in this place. And then, the figure was in front of me. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and I felt like I was staring into the face of pure evil. I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the sound of my own heart pounding in my ears. As I looked into the figure's eyes, I knew that I was doomed. I was part of this curse, this ritual, and I would never escape. The words echoed in my mind. You can't escape what you don't understand. And I knew that I was trapped forever, a prisoner of this cursed village. I'm not sure how much you want me to write, but I'll assume you want me to write the section titled The Discovery, with approximately 833 words. I'll write it in a way that's engaging, conversational, and perfect for voiceover. I'll maintain continuity with the previous sections, ensure a smooth flow, and keep the content focused on the section title and key points. As I stepped out of the car, the mist swirling around me seemed to grow thicker, like a damp shroud that clung to my skin. I had to squint to see anything, but ahead of me, the village loomed, its abandoned houses seeming to stretch out like skeletal fingers. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I gazed upon the eerie sight. The radio crackled with static, and I fiddled with the dial, trying to find a clear signal. But there was nothing, just an endless stream of white noise that seemed to match the rhythm of my pounding heart. I took a deep breath and tried to shake off the feeling of unease. I had to get out of the car and explore the village. The question was, what secrets lay hidden within those crumbling walls? As I stepped onto the pavement, the mist swirled around my ankles, making it hard to see more than a few feet in front of me. I stumbled forward, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. The houses seemed to loom above me, their boarded-up windows like empty eyes staring back. I walked down the main street, my footsteps echoing off the walls. The silence was oppressive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I stopped in front of a particular house, its door hanging crookedly on its hinges. Something about it seemed off. I reached out a hand to touch the door, and as I did, it creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should go inside, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I stepped across the threshold. The hallway was narrow and dark, the air thick with dust. I stumbled forward, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. As I walked, I noticed that the walls were adorned with old photographs, pictures of families, children, and couples. They seemed to be from a different era, a time when life was simpler and happier. I felt a pang of sadness as I gazed upon the faces, wondering what had happened to these people. I walked further into the house, my footsteps echoing off the walls. The air grew colder, and I could sense a presence lurking just out of sight. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination. But as I turned a corner, I saw it. A photo frame on a dusty shelf, a family smiling back at me. But as I reached out to touch it, the frame shattered in my hand, revealing strange symbols etched into the back. I felt a chill run down my spine as I gazed upon the symbols. They seemed to be some sort of code, a message left behind by the people who once lived here. I turned the frame over in my hand, studying the symbols more closely. They seemed to be a mix of letters and numbers, a combination lock that held a dark secret. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that I had stumbled upon something much bigger than I had initially thought. As I stood there, trying to make sense of the symbols, I heard it, a slow, ominous knocking sound coming from the other side of the room. I spun around, but there was no one there. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, and I felt a sense of unease wash over me. I knew that I had to get out of there, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The knocking grew louder, and I could feel a presence closing in around me. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was trapped, and I knew it. As I stood there, frozen in fear, I heard a creaking sound behind me. I turned to see the door to the attic slowly opening, a gust of cold wind hitting me in the face. I tried to scream, but my voice was caught in my throat. The attic was dark and dusty, the air thick with the scent of decay. I stumbled forward, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. And that's when I saw it. An old chest in the center of the room, its lid slightly ajar. I approached the chest cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I opened the lid, I was met with a sight that made my blood run cold. Inside the chest was an old diary, its pages filled with disturbing entries, written in strange handwriting. The words seemed to leap off the page, telling a tale of disappearances and rituals. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I had stumbled upon something truly sinister. As I read the diary, the knocking grew louder, more insistent. I knew that I had to get out of there, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The diary seemed to be calling to me, drawing me deeper into the darkness. I felt a sense of dread wash over me as I realized that I was in over my head. And then, just as I was about to turn the page, the lights flickered, and the house seemed to groan. I heard whispers, my name being softly called from the darkness. I knew that I was not alone in the house. As I stood in the dimly lit attic, the air thick with dust and the stench of rot, my eyes landed on the old diary. It was hidden away in a chest, buried beneath layers of forgotten memories. I opened it, and the worn leather creaked in protest. The pages were yellowed, and the handwriting was a strange, spidery script. I hesitated, wondering if I should delve into the secrets within, but something compelled me to turn the page. The entries were dated, and they began in the early 1900s. At first, they seemed ordinary, detailing the daily lives of the villagers. But as I read on, the tone shifted. The writer spoke of disappearances, of people vanishing into thin air. The entries grew increasingly erratic, the handwriting becoming more frantic. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read about the villagers performing rituals, their goal being to trap souls and prevent a curse from escaping. The writer mentioned an ancient tongue used to chant and invoke dark powers. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the true extent of the village's depravity. The entry spoke of a curse, born from the very ritual the villagers had performed. It was said to be a punishment, a consequence of meddling with forces beyond their control. The writer spoke of a cycle, one that would repeat itself forever. I couldn't help but wonder if I was a part of this cycle, if I had unknowingly stumbled into the village's dark history. As I read on, the diary's entries grew more frequent, the language more urgent. The writer spoke of a figure, one that had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. I felt a presence around me, as if the figure was watching, waiting for me to uncover the truth. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into the diary's world, that I was becoming a part of the curse. The entries grew more cryptic, the language more obscure. I began to wonder if I was reading about the past or the future. Was I the next victim, or was I already part of the cycle? The diary's final entry was dated the day I arrived in the village. The writer spoke of a presence, one that had been growing stronger. It was a being, born from the very curse the villagers had created. The writer spoke of a choice, one that would determine the fate of the village and its inhabitants. As I closed the diary, I felt a sense of trepidation. I knew that I had stumbled into something much larger than myself. The village's dark history was real, and I was now a part of it. I couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead, what the consequences of my actions would be. The lights flickered, and the house seemed to groan. I heard whispers, my name being softly called from the darkness. I knew that I had to leave, to escape the village's grasp. But as I turned to flee, I saw the figure standing in the doorway. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and I knew that I was trapped. The world around me began to distort, the colors twisting into dark, monstrous shapes. I tried to scream, but my voice was muffled. The figure reached out to me, and I felt myself being pulled into the darkness. I was part of the cycle now, forever bound to the village's cursed ritual. As I was dragged deeper into the earth, I heard the screams of the village's inhabitants. They were trapped, just like me, forever trapped in the cycle of the curse. I was the next victim, and I knew that I would never be able to escape the darkness that had consumed me. As I descended into the heart of the village, the air grew thick with an otherworldly presence. It started with whispers, a gentle murmur that seeped into my mind like a chill. I couldn't quite make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just the wind, but deep down I knew better. Every step felt heavier, as if the ground itself was resisting my progress. The trees seemed to loom over me, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to snare me. I quickened my pace, but the sensation only intensified. It was as if I was being pulled into a world beyond our own, a realm where the very fabric of reality was twisted and distorted. And then, I heard it, my name, being called from the darkness. It was a soft whisper at first. Oh, but it grew louder, more insistent. But it was a scream that echoed through my very soul. I spun around, but there was no one there. The trees stood silent, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The wind rustled the leaves, but it was just the wind. Or was it? I took a step back, my heart racing with fear. The sound grew louder, more urgent. I tried to run, but my feet felt heavy. But if they were rooted to the spot, the whispers grew clearer, a language I didn't understand, but one that sent shivers down my spine. I felt a presence closing in around me, a darkness that threatened to consume me whole. And then I heard the shuffling sound. It started as a faint rustling, a soft scraping of feet against the ground, but it grew louder, more insistent, until it was a cacophony of sound that threatened to overwhelm me. I spun around trying to locate the source, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices that seemed to be closing in on me. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The world around me was spinning, colors bleeding into dark, monstrous shapes. The trees seemed to twist and writhe, their branches like snakes slithering through the air. I stumbled, fell to my knees, and as I looked up, I saw the figure standing before me. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, a cold, calculating intelligence that seemed to pierce right through me. I tried to scream again, but my voice was silenced by some unseen force. The figure reached out a hand, and as I watched, my world began to distort, twisting and writhing like a living thing. I was trapped, caught in a nightmare from which I couldn't awaken. The figure's hand closed around my wrist, and as I looked up, I saw my own reflection staring back at me. But it was twisted, distorted, a monstrous reflection that seemed to belong to someone else entirely. And then, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the ground, my head throbbing with pain. The village was silent, the trees standing still and unmoving. I stumbled to my feet, looking around in confusion. The figure was nowhere to be seen, but the whispers lingered in my mind, a haunting melody that seemed to follow me everywhere. I knew then that I was in grave danger. The village was home to a dark, supernatural force, one that seemed to be closing in around me with every passing moment. I knew I had to get out, to escape the village before. As I stood frozen in the darkness, the shadowy figure's eyes locked onto mine, radiating an otherworldly intensity. The air around us seemed to thicken, heavy with the weight of foreboding. I tried to move, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. The figure's presence was a living, breathing entity pulsating with malevolent energy. Its eyes, two glowing orbs, seemed to bore into my very soul, stripping away the last vestiges of my sanity. I felt myself being pulled into a vortex of terror, unable to escape the abyss that yawned before me. The figure began to shift and contort, its body twisting and elongating like a living shadow. As I watched in horror, its form began to merge with the darkness, becoming one with the very fabric of the night. The air seemed to ripple and distort, as if reality itself was being warped and twisted. I felt my mind reeling, struggling to comprehend the sheer scale of the terror that was unfolding before me. And then, in a flash of insight, I understood. The figure was not a creature at all, but a manifestation of the curse that had consumed the village. It was the physical embodiment of the darkness that had taken hold of Lena, twisting her into a monstrous form that was no longer human. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer, crushing my spirits and leaving me shattered and broken. I was trapped in a living nightmare, with no escape from the horrors that surrounded me. The figure, now a twisted, nightmarish parody of humanity, reached out a bony hand and grasped my wrist. As I screamed, the world around me dissolved into chaos, the colors twisting and writhing like living snakes. I was dragged deeper into the abyss, the shadows closing in around me like a living, breathing entity. And then, everything went black. The last thing I remember is the sound of my own screams, echoing through the void as I was consumed by the curse. The darkness closed in, a suffocating shroud that wrapped around me, squeezing the life from my body. As the last vestiges of my sanity faded away, I saw the village for what it truly was, a trapped, eternal cycle of horror, where the damned souls were forever bound to the earth. And I knew, with a sense of creeping dread, that I was now a part of that cycle, forever trapped in the abyss of the curse. The camera pans out, showing the village in all its gruesome glory. The houses, once abandoned and decaying, now seem to writhe and twist, as if alive. The air, oh, the air is heavy with the stench of death and decay, and the silence is oppressive, a physical presence that weighs upon the viewer. And then, in a final desperate bid for attention, the camera zooms in on the shattered photo frame, where Lena's face now stares back at me, twisted in a macabre grin. The screen flickers, and the words appear, "You can't escape what you don't."